Hello, group. Nice to meet you. So tonight I'm going to start by, I'm just going to tell you a little bit of my story. Kinsey shared a little bit about some of the stuff you guys have been journeying through, and so I think a lot of my story kind of relates to some of that. After that, we're going to talk a little bit about our relationships with our kids. Kinsey was at women's camp last year, and I did a workshop on just how to communicate with your teenagers, with your younger children. She asked me to kind of touch on that stuff again. If you don't have kids, or if your kids are much older or much younger, this is still good relational stuff. Like, it's not, none of it is, this will never apply to me. This is good in our marriage relationships. This is good in if you are in a mentoring relationship with someone. Some of the stuff is good for if you're an employer and you have employees. So some of it is just universal wisdom. And so if you're thinking like, I'm not on the parenting journey right now, don't shut down. This is still some good stuff. So to start with, my story is that I grew up in a town called Cranbrook, BC. Does anyone know where that is? It's in the Kootenays. I'm a Kootenay girl. So Cranbrook is kind of a mix of like Alberta and Nelson. So I grew up in this weird like hippie hick town. So I have a lot of internal struggle that I live with because of that. I grew up in a family that my parents are incredible human beings. They are very active in social justice. They do not necessarily share my faith that I have now, but they were very, very involved in our community, and still to this day, both of them do really awesome work in our small town of Cranbrook. But that being said, I found myself as a young person feeling a little bit isolated. My problems were not necessarily big enough to bring to my social worker parents who were dealing with kids who were being beaten or struggling with drug abuse or all kinds of other things. And so I didn't really learn how to talk to them well. I'm not going to say this resulted in a number of things, but along with a number of things, this made it hard for me to be mentored by my parents. Throughout my teenage years, I was a party girl. I did all of the things. I kissed all of the boys. And by the time I was like 13 and 14, so really, really young, I was doing things like sneaking out my bedroom window and walking into town, literally through cougar country, which is terrifying to me now as an adult, and going to parties in the middle of the night with people who were much older than me. I spent one summer praying, and I just said, God, if you're real, if you're out there, you need to do something now, because I'm out otherwise. Like, I'm going to piece out of this life. And that summer, I met a boy, and that boy has now become my husband. We had a very tumultuous relationship between the time I met him and the time he became my husband. He was the golden boy of the Foursquare Church. He was 2.5 years older than me, and he was the guy that everyone was like going to save up and help him go to seminary. He played Jesus in all of our plays because he grew facial hair before all the other boys, and because he was the most holy. And I became the only smudge on his otherwise perfect record. And so when I was in grade 12, I became pregnant with our son. There was a lot of shame that came with that for me, and especially because he had brought me to this relationship with God. He brought me to this place where I honestly believed that there was another way that my life could go, that I wasn't defined by my mistakes or the messiness of who I was. And so when I found out I was pregnant, I was like, oh no, instead of being able to follow him into this life of wholesome goodness, I've dragged him into mine. I've ruined his life. And so I spent grade 12 in a small town. What I didn't tell you is my parents were also the people who did like the sex ed talks in school. So it was like embarrassing from like a Christian community level, and it was really embarrassing from like a secular community level. Like it was a disaster. And so there was a lot of embarrassment and shame that went along with this. And unfortunately, 20 years ago, we didn't have things like pregnancy care centers and daycares in our high schools. We didn't have those things, and so I was even asked to leave our high school. I did not, because I'm incredibly stubborn, but it was really, really a tough time. And I remember thinking when I was pregnant, I was like, God, you're gonna have to explain to me how you love people unconditionally, because I don't feel like there's any room for you to love me through this. And my husband and I got married 2 weeks after I graduated, and I was 8 months pregnant. My wedding photos look like everyone's at a funeral. I was really angry until I had an 18-year-old daughter, and then I was like, nope, totally get it. I'm cool with it, Mom. Also, my my mom, about half an hour before my wedding, she's like, it's not too late if you need to back out. At the time, I was like, what the heck? And now that I have older daughters, I'm like, nope, totally get it. I'm cool with it, Mom. I understand where you're going with that. It was terrifying, I'm sure, for the adults in my life to watch me walk down the aisle at 17 and 8 months pregnant. My husband was actually my legal guardian for a year, which is hilarious. Oh my gosh, you guys, he loved signing my permission forms. My music teacher actually invited him on a trip to Banff with us for our local jazz group to be one of the chaperones. And yeah, it was terrible. It was so bad. Anyways, funny stories aside, then we had our son, and I remember looking at him, and I remember being totally awestruck by the way that God designed us to catch a glimpse of who he was. Because all of a sudden, I knew completely what it meant to love somebody before they had done anything for me, and to know without a shadow of a doubt, no matter what they ever did, I could not love them less. And if God, who is love, has even more capacity, then oh my goodness, how much more can he love us, even when we fail? And so began this beautiful redemption that my life represents. The other thing I realized is that God, who is love, designed us, and it doesn't always work that way, but the blueprint hasn't changed. But he intended that we would be knit together from the fabric of two people's intimacy with one another. One of the reasons why sex is such a beautiful and important and sacred thing is because it is the beginning of us. And it does not work that way in our world anymore. I work with teenagers, and to be quite honest with you, the majority of them don't have parents who are still together. But the fact that that was still their blueprint, that the God of love meant for us to be knit together by love, that would be the fabric of how we are designed, says something about who he sees us to be. And that doesn't change no matter who our parents were. His blueprint of who we are doesn't change. And so that becomes the foundation of a lot of the things that I'm going to share with you tonight about what it means to be a parent, what it means to be in a relationship with people that you are meant to grow and mentor. I'm going to skip ahead a lot, and then I'll go back to the parenting practical stuff. My son turned 20 this summer, and that's super weird. And those of you who have toddlers, does anyone have toddlers in this room, or preschoolers? Okay. I am so sorry. Everyone is lying to you. We spent a lot of time telling really ragged, tired-looking moms that it gets easier, and it is a lie that is being perpetuated by every mom I know. Because you will sleep more, and people will vomit on you less, and you will have to clean up less private bits. But becoming the parent of an adult is the hardest thing I have done.
Amen.
Thank you. My son has been one of my best friends. We are so close. We are such good buds. When he was 10, we were riding bikes together, and I said to him, "Your dad's right. You know, maybe it is okay that you guys are growing up. You're pretty fun now," because I love babies, so I was like mourning the loss of babies at the time. And he goes, "Mom, like of course we're having more fun. Like why wouldn't you want us to grow up?" And I'm like, "Well, you know, like someday you're gonna go away and move away, and I'm gonna miss you, and then what I'm gonna do?" And he goes, "Well, Mom, I'm not moving out." "Yes, darling, you are moving out." And he goes, "Well, that's okay. I'll just buy a house next door to you." And I was like, "Your future wife might not want to live next door to her mother-in-law." And he said this to me: well, Mom, she's just going to have to understand who the most important woman in my life is. I let it rest for just a minute and reveled in it before I sat him down on a bench and said, let me explain some things to you because I don't want my future daughter-in-law to hate me. Fast forward to now, I think my son has met my future daughter-in-law. They've been dating for about 1.5 years, and in the spring, he went away to Rockridge to be an intern for 4 months. And it was the first time he was leaving me for a long time. So I bought us tickets to Avengers: The Endgame for the Friday before he left because we'd been on this 10-year, Marvel superhero journey together. And I thought, one good mother-son date before you go. That was on Friday. Thursday night he comes home, and Alex and I are sitting next to him. That's my husband. And he comes in and he just looks dejected. Levi, what's going on? It's like, I'm leaving this weekend, and Alicia just has so much anxiety about me going. We've only been dating a few months, and I'm going to be gone for a while, and I just don't know what's going to happen, and she's working all weekend. I don't know if we're going to spend any time together again, and Mom, I really think she's the one, and I just don't know if I can go, and he's so distraught. And so I looked at him, and I said what any good mother would do. I said, Levi, would you like to give her my ticket to Endgame? Could I? Yes. Okay, I'm gonna go tell her right now, and off he runs. And my husband, who's usually not super attuned to my emotions, an incredible man, just not super attuned to my emotions, looks at me and goes, did that sting a little bit? You have no idea. It is actually the most horrific, awful pain I've ever experienced, is having my heart ripped out of my chest as I suddenly realized that I have been completely replaced. And over the course of the next 4 months, we saw each other because I was at Rockridge working. But I wasn't there the whole 4 months, and he called me 3 times. The first time he called me because he needed me to talk him down. It's okay, that's what you do as a mom. The second time he called me to apologize to me for missing Mother's Day. And the third time he called me on my birthday, and I know it was because his girlfriend was at my house on my birthday, and when he called her, he said, you should call your mom. And so my son has replaced me. And I was sitting with that feeling, and once again, God showed me another aspect of himself. See, God designed us so well that these relationships reveal him in our lives. And so, Father just said to me, Sarah, you will never reciprocate the way that I love you. Just like your children cannot reciprocate the way that you love them. My daughters might someday understand, but if we're honest with ourselves, we do not reciprocate our mother's love. Nobody can. There's nothing on this planet quite like the mother's love. And once again, it was this bittersweet moment of understanding God has designed us so that we could get a glimpse of who he is and how deeply he cares for us. So we talk about this concept of motherhood. Keep that always in mind, that you are actually a representation of the Father in your children's lives. And not only does that give you a beautiful responsibility, but it also gives you a constant glimpse into how precious you are. Cool? All right. In the meantime, let's start with, I would like you guys to think about for a second, I'm going to give you a second to think, what is one person in your life who can absolutely tell you how it is? Like, this is the woman or man in your life, maybe your husband, but probably not. Really good girlfriend. This is the person who can tell you when you've got a gross sit on your face, or when you're acting like a doofus, or you've just said something stupid, and you trust them completely, and you will actually adjust for them. Think about who that person is in your life. Who's someone in your life who can correct you, and you will hear them all the way. All right, so we're gonna brainstorm, what are some of the characteristics of that person or your relationship with them? Just shout out words.
She's short.
And really cute. You're a pain in the butt. Pain in the butt. In all seriousness, not physical characteristics. No, what are the characteristics of that person in your life or that relationship?
Honesty. Tons of honesty.
And of course, this
I'll get one from Josh.
I got another one. I was smart. I brought two.
You're amazing.
I know. It's like I've done this before. Not honestly. Honesty. Okay, honesty. What else? Loyalty. Caring. Okay. Kindness. What
I
else?
want to say like discipline, but in a way that like what they have good boundaries. Like they are not just gonna tell you what you want to hear, they tell you what you need to hear. I don't know what word.
Like healthy discipline, like a
yeah, like they do with morals. Yeah, like good morals, I guess, or
like you would want to model yourself after them. So they're a good example.
yeah, sure. But you know what I mean? Like they don't just tell you what you want to hear, and it'd be easier to do that.
Like assertiveness.
Assertive.
Yeah.
There we go, Tash.
Okay. What else?
Courageous.
Courageous.
Experienced.
Confident.
Sensitive.
Even gentle. I like it. That's one of my favorite words. Vulnerable.
Gracious.
Gracious.
There's the word.
Compassionate. What else? Wise.
I don't know how to explain this, but you can see God through them almost. Like you can see how God is represented through the way they are.
I'm gonna go good Jesus rep. Can I do that? Good Jesus rep.
Good Jesus.
Okay, what else? Loving. How about mutual respect? Right? They respect you back, right? Which also means respecting your boundaries, doesn't it? And respecting your feelings. And knowing when it's not a good time to correct you. Yeah? Anything else? Anything we're missing that's glaringly obvious to you?
So understanding kind of goes with mutual respect.
I'm gonna write it anyway. We can have all the things.
And they want the best for you.
Good motives. Good
You
intentions.
know that they have good
You need
intentions.
a good intentions.
I feel like constant too. Consistent.
Consistency.
Trustworthy. Empathetic.
I'm not good at this. I wasn't expecting you to come up with so much. Okay. Anything else?
How about forgiving?
Get her.
Not easily offended.
I find they're kind of funny, like they can laugh at themselves and laugh with you.
Yeah, I'm gonna say humor up here because I think that matters a lot. Anything else? Anything that's not on this list, you're like, I will be so sad if it doesn't end up on this list.
Well, I feel like it's rude a lot of the time, but then obviously, personally, I feel like that's rude, but I guess it's true. You know? They're not always sensitive, but especially I don't know.
Your person is kind of blunt with you
I feel
sometimes.
like blunt and
Convicting?
And I'm like, but I guess they could have been kinder, right? See?
That's fair.
Rude.
That's fair. But that reaction is something we'll come back to because that's important. That's an important reaction. So I wrote this all down because because I asked you to think of somebody in your life, if they corrected you, be like, yes, you're right, I will do that thing. And we often think of our children in a different category than us, as though they don't also need all of this to be corrected. So in Young Life, we have this statement. We say you have to earn the right to be heard. We talk about the fact that you have to have a relationship before you can speak into someone's life. And obviously, we have a little equity with our own kids or our own husbands or our own employees or whatever. But we kind of assume, I think, as parents, especially as moms, it's like, excuse me, like I let you live inside of my actual body. So suck it up and do what you're told, right? That there is this piece of you that knows where that particular backache came from, or, that sciatica, and you know which kid you can blame it on, and you know which one made all the stretch marks happen. We have this, we know the cost of these human beings and their existence. And so we think, subconsciously, that we have already earned the right to tell them what to do. But the reality is that they don't remember one little thing about that. They don't. Honestly, most of your kids are completely unaware of your sciatica and your stretch marks and the fact that they sucked nourishment out of your body while you tried to sleep. There is no, they don't care. They don't know. And once they hit teenagehood, they don't want to know. It's too late. Okay, I'm gonna tell you one more funny story. So, I homeschooled my kids, and my son went to high school for the first time at KSS, and he's a grade 10, and I work for Young Life, so I hang out with some of my Young Life kids at lunch hour. And so I was there with some of my girls, and there was a Pacho truck, and my son Levi was in line at the Pacho truck, and I saw him, and I was like, Levi, share your Pachos with me. And he was like, no, my money, my Pachos, because he's in grade 10, and that's how they talk to their mothers. And so I was like, but Levi, I gave you life. And I'm yelling at him across the field in front of them. But I gave you life. And he's like, no, my money, my Pachos. And I'm like, but you're the fruit of my loins. And then the girls around him kind of stepped back. And he did this without missing a beat. It's my fault, I'm his mother. I made him this way. But he goes, don't worry, it's just my mom. If you ignore her, she'll go away. Was not embarrassed at all. So he comes home that night and he tells the story over dinner to his sisters. And I'm sitting at the table with his youngest sister, and she's reading a book. And the oldest sister, who's just a couple years younger than him, goes, what are loins? And my husband's like, well, right now I am cooking pork loins, and it's the inner thigh of a pig. And she goes, oh. And then my one step younger daughter goes, well, then you could just walk around calling everybody loin fruit. That would be totally accurate. And he's like, yes, I suppose you could. I wouldn't, but I suppose you could. Only your mother does things like that. And then my youngest daughter looks up from her book and goes, guys, we're about to eat. We don't need to picture these things. Let's move on. And then goes back to her book. 2 years later, I was at a leadership lunch with some people from Thrive where my kids had volunteered. And they're like, you're the loin fruit lady. So watch what you say to your children. That's a freebie. All right, so you want to earn the right to be heard. And when your kids are really little, the truth is you continue to earn the right because you still wipe their butts and you still give them food and you still dress them and brush their hair and you're doing all the things for them. But as they get older, you don't have that kind of place in their life anymore. So you've had this positional authority. You are literally, to a smaller child, and this is psychology, you are the closest thing to God they actually understand. Because you have all the things and they know that, and you have all the wisdom, and they literally do not see themselves as existing outside of you. They don't understand the concept of their own autonomy at that age. I know it seems like that. I know it does because they are defiant and they talk back at a certain point. But psychologically, they are an extension of you. That's what they understand. So you have this positional authority. You get to boss them around. You get to say things like, because I'm the mom and I say so. But I would say to you, don't. don't just say, because I'm the mom and I say so. Whenever you possibly can, give them the reason. And the reason for this is that you are instilling them internal motivation instead of external motivation. Right now, they have external motivation because you're the mom and you say so, or you're the dad and you say so. But when you give them the reason behind things, they slowly begin to develop external motivation. And you need to think about this no matter what's going on. Don't worry if you have teenagers, we're gonna get there. But for you guys with younger kids, they're going to slowly build into themselves this concept of, if I do that, then these are the consequences. Now, if you got kids and they're like fighting or whatever, and you go, stop yelling! Okay, where are we? What's the mutual respect? Good example. Consistency. When you shout at your children to stop shouting, you have just undone any possible actual learning they're getting from this. If you send your kids to a timeout without an explanation, what you've done is punish instead of discipline. Discipline comes the same word as disciple. It's teaching. It's consequences with a purpose or a reason. So for instance, one of the things we did in our house is that we didn't have timeouts. We didn't set a timer. We would take the kids to their room and we'd say, you're being very rude, or you're yelling at your sister, or you're whatever. You need a minute to yourself. So why don't you go read a book? Why don't you play with your toys in your room? Why don't you be alone? And when you are ready, so I'm giving you the power, I'm giving you the opportunity to be internally motivated, you come out and we will have a conversation. This worked for 3 of my 4 children. The one that is totally made in my image would scream from her room for like 45 minutes, and I would sit outside her door and go, Shiloh, if you just stop screaming, you can come out like you're in control. She couldn't do it. She couldn't self-soothe. And so what I learned from that, I'm like, okay, what do I do with this? I learned that she literally couldn't self-soothe. For her, she did not have the capacity to calm down on her own. So timeouts for Shiloh looked like, I actually went in with her. You guys, it was costly. It was a pain in the butt. It took time out of my day. I didn't like it, but I would go in a room with her and I would put her on my lap and I would hang on to her until she was able to soothe, because she literally couldn't self-regulate her own emotions yet. You know what? She is 16 and she will still come home from a bad day of school and say, Mom, can we snuggle and watch This Is Us? I need to have a good cry. She is the type of person that needs someone else to help regulate her. This is a normal thing. There are people who are like that. If I had just shut her in a room and closed the door and let her scream it out for 4 hours, what I'm learning, the more I learn about child psychology and the more I learn about self-regulation, the more I realize what I would have done is I would have literally taught her, you're on your own, you can't trust anybody come from, you have to figure it out yourself. I would have been teaching her how to have a hard heart for her personality type. All my other 3 children, they figured it out. Now, teenagers, adults, they will give themselves a timeout because they didn't learn timeouts as a punishment, they learned timeouts as an adult tool. It's a skill. And then I would demonstrate it. I would be that good example. Where's example? Good example. I would be that good example by when I got frustrated or when I lost my temper, because I did. I'm not going to tell you you have to be perfect. When I yelled at my kids, I'd be like, you know what? I'm sorry. You guys are not behaving well, but before I can deal with that, Mommy needs a timeout. And I would give myself a timeout. And I would go calm down. And I would take a minute to pray. Therefore, demonstrating for them that you're not being punished, you are being disciplined or discipled. I am showing you how to be a grown-up. Does that make sense? You see the difference? So, you want to earn the right to be heard, and part of how you earn the right to be heard is you think about who in your life has the authority to speak into your life, and how do you become that person for your children. You are not entitled to be that person. Just because you grew them in your body does not entitle you to be that person. That sucks and I'm sorry, but it's true. So, you're going to earn the right to be heard. And the second thing you want to remember is that you need to transition your relationship. So, positional authority works when I have the position of the boss. I am the boss. I am the mom. That is my position and I have authority because of it. I don't know if you've noticed, but our world doesn't take well or kindly to positional authority anymore. we eviscerate politicians who have positional authority because we expect people to earn it no matter what their position is. Is that not true? Guess what? So do our teenagers. Does any human being who has learned how to be autonomous. So around puberty, what happens psychologically is kids become self-actualizing, it's called, which means that I begin to see myself as a being apart from you, my family, and you, my parents. I am no longer an extension of you. So if I'm autonomous, I do what I want, right? And if you aren't earning it, you're not the boss of me. I don't have to do what you say. And quite frankly, they're learning that in school anyway. They're learning that on the internet. They're learning that on their phones. You are not the boss of them. They can do what they want. You literally can't force them to do anything. At a certain age, they can leave your home and the police will not bring them back. The reality is, we do not have the kind of oomph behind our positional authority that parents 100 years ago would with teenagers. That wasn't good authority anyway, because that kind of authority elicits rebellion, right? Because positional authority doesn't get you, I want to listen to what you say. Positional authority gets you, I'm going to try and not get caught, right? What you want to have is relational authority. Relational authority only comes through conversation. So relationship rather than rules, conversation rather than control. Somewhere around 9 years old, 8 years old, you need to start intentionally giving your kid some autonomy. Now, at that age, they aren't quite self-actualizing yet, so they will still do what you say, and so you kind of like test the waters whenever you can. So for us, we were always telling our kids, be careful what you put in your stew. That's what we said about their brains. So whatever you're watching on TV, the music you're listening to, the books you're reading, just be careful what you put in your stew. If you put a dirty old boot in your stew, you can take the boot out, but the residual flavor still sits there. It takes a long time to get out. So, let's not watch dirty or violent movies. Let's put good things in our stew. So our son came home with this book, and he's like, I want to read this book. Is it good for my stew? And we said, you know what? You're 9. Why don't you read a few chapters and then you come tell us, do you think it's good for your stew? I had no idea what this book was. I didn't read it first to decide whether or not this was the one he could, cut his teeth on. We just said, you know what, it's just time. It's just time for you to have the opportunity to make some decisions for yourself in a lovingly guided way. So he came back after a couple of chapters, he's like, I'm not sure. Okay, well, tell me why you're not sure. He's like, I don't know, I'm starting to cheer for the bad guy. And I feel like maybe I'm not supposed to cheer for the bad guy, but it's a really interesting book, so I'd like to keep reading it. All right, keep reading it. Come back in a couple chapters, tell me what you think. He came back in a couple chapters and he was like, you know what? This book isn't good for my stew. You really do. They make the bad guy out to be the good guy, but he's doing really bad things, and now he's killed somebody, and I don't want to read it anymore. We're like, cool, excellent. All of a sudden, because we didn't control that, we didn't say, I'm not going to let you put something in your brain that I haven't specifically said is okay. Instead, we've said, actually, let's talk about what's going into your head, because you are going to be exposed to the world, and I would rather walk you through that. So we gained this relational authority by having conversation. At 13 and 14, it looks like, hey, I want to go to my friend's house. They're having a sleepover party. Okay, are their parents going to be there? What kind of choices do you want to make for yourself, right? And after the party going, tell me how that went. What did you feel good about? What didn't you feel good about? Now, I'm going to confess something to you, because this is not, I wouldn't call it backfired, but this has gone to a kind of a weird extreme place for me. My son and his girlfriend have decided that they aren't going to kiss on the lips until they get married. Let's be really clear, that is not my line. And I said to him, that is not my line. So we're clear that is not my line. I don't know where the line is. Your existence is proof that I don't know where the line is. But that is not my line. But you need to decide on that with you and her. What I know for sure is that you and her need to decide separately, and then you pick whichever line is more conservative, because you never push someone over their line and you never let someone push you over yours. Those are the only things I know for sure. But that's a weird line. And after a little while, I actually kind of freaked out because I remember my mom and dad, once again, don't share my faith. And so the whole like don't have sex until you're married thing isn't really on their radar. My mom said, aren't you worried you're gonna, make him feel guilty or sexually repressed or any of these things? And I was like, oh no. And so all of a sudden my mom's words were like coming back to me and I was like, oh no, I've made him think sex is bad and blah, blah, blah. And I was like freaking out. And so he's like happily playing Minecraft on the computer with his sisters. And I interrupted him because I was panicking. I was like, you're not like afraid of sex, are you, right? Like, like it's a beautiful thing and like you can look forward to it. And like, he's like, Mom, you and Dad make it very clear that sex is something to look forward to. It's fine. I'm not sexually repressed. This is just the line we've chosen. And so we've had this like weird, like, oh, my kids are making decisions that are actually more conservative than me, that I was like trying to avoid imposing this strict rule on them, and they've chosen this weird strictness for themselves that I'm like, this is foreign. Eventually, I kind of sat him down and I said, are you sure you want the very first time you kiss a girl to be in front of an audience? Like, I'm not saying change your line, I'm just saying, hey, can we talk about, like, isn't that gonna be weird for you guys? And he's like, you know what, we're gonna think about it. They were separate for a weekend and they decided they were gonna pray about it, and they came back and it was actually his girlfriend that came to me and said, hey, I just want you to know, Levi told me what you told him, and we went away and we prayed about it. We both decided that we feel called to this. And I was like, okay. And she goes, so, yeah, if you could just, just support us in that, that'd be great. I'm like, okay, so good. Yes, I will. Yes, I will do that. But I did ask my son, I was like, can you explain this to me? Like, are you just, like, clearly I had no self-control as a teenager, so I don't know what this is like. So can you just, like, this is weird. Like, can you explain to me what's going on? Like, you guys are really cuddly and you guys like watch movies in each other's arms. Like, aren't you dying from just like wondering what it's like, or like just what's going on for you? And he's like, Mom, it's freedom. I was like, what? He goes, yeah. We never worry about if we've crossed the line with each other. We never leave a date wondering if we've gone too far or if we've pushed the other person in any way. When we're cuddling, we're never like preoccupied with it because we know really clearly where the line is, and so it's not distracting to us, and we have a really healthy relationship and we talk really well, and we've decided this together and we feel really good about it. And I'm like, oh. And he goes, and we've talked about when we get married, we're gonna leave a long gap between the ceremony and the reception. I was like, at least you're thinking practically. All right. But it's one of those moments where I'm like, okay, that's what it looks like to be internally motivated. To be internally motivated looks like you're not just doing whatever you've been told to do. You haven't just swallowed whole what I think is the right way. You've taken the deep values and the paying attention and the cost-benefit analysis of your life and how to pray about something and think about something and make a solid decision for yourself and communicate it well, like all of the things. So it's not, all of a sudden, it's not about not having sex until you're married. It's about this capacity to make a decision for yourself that feels good, that doesn't feel like shame, and it doesn't feel like control. In fact, it feels like freedom and you own it. And it's really hard to get there if you've never had the freedom to make a decision for yourself. Do you see the through line here? And so it goes all the way back to like when you're potty training. Are you like, I just need you to stop pooping your pants? Or are you like, no, I like want you to have the independence to do these things for yourself? What is your motivation? I want you to poop on the potty because nobody likes having poop in their underwear. I don't want you to poop on the potty because the potty sings and you get a story and you get 5 candies. I want you to poop on the potty because it itself is its own reward. Now, let's be honest. We all just do what we need to do at that time in our lives. But my point is, every time we're trying to teach our kids something like that, it's important to go, I know what this is about, but what is it about? School, report cards. Oh my gosh, you're getting a D in math. What are we gonna do about that? We need to study more, you need to work harder, you need to, wait a second. What does your effort mark say? Because you know what? Some people are really good at math and some people are not really good at math. And is this about math or is this about work ethic? Because if it's about work ethic, then it doesn't matter if you get an A in math. If it's about work ethic, it matters that you get a G in work ethic. If it's about work ethic, it matters that you know how to ask for help. If it's about work ethic, then it matters that you know that if you're not good at math, that has nothing to do with your value. And I think as parents, we're just so used to just, let's be honest, kids are exhausting and we're just trying to get them through and hope that they turn into adults that can function because we don't want them to live with us forever. But when we don't stop to think about, this isn't about math, what is it really about? This isn't about cleaning your room, what is it really about? This isn't about doing the dishes, this is about learning how to be a contributing member of society, and that starts in our home, where we all share, and I am not your slave because you will never have a slave again. It's about learning how to change your sheets because I don't want you to have a weird skin disorder when you're 30 because you never learned how to change your sheets. Right? Like, this is what it's about, but what is it really about? All right. How much time do I have left? So many things I like telling you about. I'm gonna fast forward though. We've talked about the real lesson. Again, if you don't have kids, or if you don't have kids at home anymore, or you have really little kids, you're like, this doesn't apply to me yet, I'm just gonna point out, this goes with employees too. Is it about that project, or is it about the work ethic? Is it about this thing that's happening right now, or is it about the culture you're trying to build in your company? Like, it's always in everything. It's like, is it this thing, or is this a symptom of the actual thing I need to deal with? And if I'm shouting about this thing, we'll never get to what the actual issue is. Does that make sense? I'm going to tell you one more story because I think it's really important because we're all women here, and whether you have daughters or you have young girls in your lives, or you have a sister who has young girls in her life, I just think as women this is really important, especially what Kinsey was telling you guys were talking about before. Our sexuality is like a really big deal, and I think we have an inherent shame in our society just about how our bodies work. So when I was 10-ish, I was really young when I got my first period, super young. And my mom was out of town, and my sisters were out of town, and so I was with my dad and my brother. We were building sets in this guy's backyard. And I got my period. And I was like, it's okay, I know what this is, I know how to deal with it. So I dealt with it the first day. Somehow I missed the memo in school when we got that talk when they separated the boys and girls, that this lasts 3 to 5 days. Like, I thought it was like a one moment thing, you know, stick a Band-Aid on it, it heals over, whatever, I don't know. I did not understand. And so by day 3, I was like, I might die. My mom is not home, and my sister's not home, and I can't tell any of the people with penises what's happening to me. So I wrote a letter saying goodbye to my family that night, and I slipped it under my pillow in case I didn't wake up, which is funny now, but if you really think about it, it's horrible that a little girl would choose death. Like, would actually choose death over just being honest about her body, right? So I was like, this is not going to happen to my children, and we went and had 3 daughters, so I was like, okay, listen, honey, you need to learn how to talk about periods, and we're having every conversation with the kids together. And he was like, nope. And I was like, oh, no, yes. And what happens when you get married when you're children is you can boss your husband around in ways that are not appropriate when you're adults who get married. So, so we had some very, like, we are having this conversation. My husband is an incredible man, and so went along with me, and we ended up having all these conversations with our kids. Every time they asked about reproduction or body parts, or Levi was crying because girls don't have penises and he felt really bad for us. Penis envy is made up by boys and they're born with it. We would always have every conversation together so that all of our kids knew, all 4 of them knew, that they could come to either mom or dad no matter what it was. And I know things about teenage boys I wish I didn't know. I didn't see that coming. this is what you sign up for when you decide to have this relationship with your children. But my first daughter, I was out of town. So I'm so glad this happened. And I was gone for a week, and I came home, and I called them every night. We talked every single night that week. So they could have told me, somebody could have told me something, but they didn't. When I got in the door, Alex is like, she wants to tell you something. And I was like, oh, okay, it's really important. You have to go wake her up and talk to her. I was like, okay. So I went and talked to my oldest daughter, and I was like, so Dad says you want to tell me something? She's like, I got my period while you were gone. I was like, oh, honey, I'm so proud of you. That's so exciting. Did you tell Dad? Yes. And he helped me with everything, and he said, don't worry, and he got me stuff, and I was like, I'm so proud of him. Like, I was like, in my head, I was like, you're so sexy right now. But she says, it's so annoying that I have to like get up every hour and change my pad at night. Like, I'm really tired. And I was like, what did your father give you? The tiniest little panty liners. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. I still get to be your hero. It doesn't have to be this way. So that was my first daughter. My second daughter, when I was away, same thing. It was the older sister and the dad who had to deal with it because I was gone. And then my third daughter, it was a Sunday afternoon, I was getting ready to leave, and she comes running to me, she's like, Mom, I have to tell you something. I was like, what is it? She goes, I think I'm getting my period. I was like, oh my gosh, like, do you want me to help you? Like, do you want me to say it? She's like, no, Dad and my sisters have got it. I just wanted you to know first. I was like, aw, that's so sweet. But here are my daughters. They're like so excited about becoming women. They weren't scared. They weren't ashamed. They weren't even grossed out. They were excited to tell their dad. And their dad got to look at them and say, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of the woman that you're becoming. I don't know about you guys, but I'm like, wow, that's gorgeous. If only all of us. The downside to all of these things is that there's always a flip side. There's always this unexpected, like I've answered questions that I didn't expect to answer, that are weird questions. And also, embarrassing things have happened to me. Like one time, Carly was giving a speech to all of our committee members from all over the region, which are mostly older men. And she's standing in front of the whole group of them, and I had texted my husband and said, hey, when you pick up the van, could you drop me off a couple of pads? Things happened a little early. Well, in comes my 9-year-old daughter with a fistful of pads, walking in front of this group of older men while Carly is talking, and straight for me, and I'm like, oh my God. So I grab her arm, we go into the kitchen, and I'm so angry. And my male boss is laughing so hard in the kitchen. And I march her outside, and I look at my husband like, what were you thinking? And he goes, she's little, she'd be more discreet. No! This is not discreet! And I am so embarrassed. And my daughter, who doesn't know to be embarrassed, looks at me and goes, what's wrong, Mama? It's just your body. Which at the time, my response was, I wasn't raised like you! And I got back in the kitchen and my boss says, listen, I won't mention this again, but is it okay if I tell my wife this story? And I was like, yeah, okay. Anyways, all of that to say, this is an adventure. If you enter into this idea of not being in control, if you enter this idea of relationship instead of rules, if you try to adjust this way, things you don't expect are going to happen, and you are going to learn more because the Father wants to demonstrate his heart through parenthood. You're going to learn more about who you are and who you are designed to be by being intentional about how you talk to your kids and how you love your kids. I have 2 teenagers and 2 adults who are honestly my closest friends. And I really believe we are living in a world that lies to us and tells us we can't be friends with our kids. That lies to us and tells us that we need to kick them out of the house when they're 18 because we're not going to like each other anymore. I don't think those things are true. I think that if we are honest with ourselves, we have created these tensions in our relationship that don't need to be as bad as they are. And we as the adults get to decide what the tone of our relationships are going to be. I have so many more things, but it is time for us to go, so I'm going to end there. I will say this to you: if you have teenage children, it's probably too late for this piece of advice, but if you have smaller children, having worked with teenagers now for the last 8 years, I can tell you that if your children have a smartphone, much of this advice might not be useful to you, because it is a Pandora's box that they will open and they will be engaged with, and your voice will become smaller and smaller. My children have survived without having a phone until they are adults, and my 2 adults have flip phones. My younger 2 daughters share an iPod that lives in our kitchen, so they can still text and they can still have Instagram, because Instagram messaging is how their friends communicate. So we haven't removed the possibility. Their friends just don't have access to them constantly. And they don't have access to social media constantly, where they are getting their value and they are finding all of these other things that are like being in the back alley of a bar, unsupervised. So if you haven't yet given your children a phone, I'm giving you permission not to. By all means, do what you want, but I'm giving you permission to say no. They will live. It will be okay. The phone companies won't let them get one on their own. That was my excuse. Sorry, the phone company doesn't think you should have one. I'm just doing what the phone company says. So I'm giving you permission for that. If you do already have a kid with a phone, parameters are good. Don't let them sleep with it. In fact, once again, be a good example. Put your phone down. Don't have your phone in front of them. They're going to be doing what you do. So, is it okay if I pray for us to finish? God, thank you so much that you are all about relationship. Thank you that you are such a good Father, that when humanity was in its infancy, you said things like, do not murder. And as we grew up, you built a relationship with us. You sent us Jesus, and you said things like, don't even have hatred in your heart for a brother. You taught us how to be. You taught us how to parent, and your word is such good instruction. And most of all, God, James 1, you say, if any of you lacks wisdom, ask for it believing, and it will be given to you without finding fault. I believe those words with all my heart for these women, that as they come across moments with husbands, with employees, with friends, and with children, they don't know how to handle the situation, things aren't working out, but they can come to you and ask for wisdom, and you promise to give it. Thank you so much for this evening, and we just lift this day up to you. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.